Hi everyone, this is Jim. I played in a tournament last weekend, the Golden State Open. That was a nice tournament. It was a real big one, a 7-round tournament with a $25,000 prize fund. In the open section, there were 8 grandmasters competing along with a bunch of other players, and the eventual winner was Andre Barish-Politz, who I'm not familiar with, but I recognize some of the other grandmasters. There was Enrico Sevillano, there was Alejandro Ramirez, there was James Tarjan, and several others. There was a total of 8 grandmasters. And I saw Sam Shanklin walking around talking to people, but he wasn't playing in this one. Anyway, it was a big tournament, 7 rounds, and I just wanted to go over my first round game here. So let's get started. Start off with e4. My opponent played e6. My opponent was a young man who was rated 2002 for this tournament, and my rating for the tournament was 1815. So he's the ratings favorite, and he was very serious. He was taking his time on all of these moves. And particularly, let's see, I played knight c3. He played knight c6. So this is an unusual variation of the French defense. I went and looked it up in the database, and it is the 4th choice here. The normal choices at this point are the classical variation bringing the knight out, or the Winauer variation bringing the bishop out, or the Rubinstein variation just taking the pawn. And of course all those have sub-variations, but those are the 3 main moves at this point. And then knight c6 here was the 4th choice. Now, I thought at the time it might be the Guimard variation, because the Guimard variation does involve this knight c6, but it turns out the Guimard variation is only, that name is given to the variation when it's played against the Tarrasch. So if I had played knight to d2 instead of knight to c3, then and black had played knight to c6, that would be the Guimard variation. But this doesn't have a name that I know. Anyway, I was going to play the natural move bishop to d3 here. Oh, no. First I continued developing. I brought another knight out, and he brought another knight out. And now he's putting some pressure on the center. And like I said, I was, like I started to say, I was going to play the natural move bishop to d3 here, just supporting the center. That's a main move here. Also, e5 is a move. It could be played like this. You could go e5, knight hops into e4, and bishop d3, and try and get some play against that bishop, that knight there on e4. He can always exchange out on c3, so he's not really in any trouble. Let's see, bishop to d3 is also a way to play it, and black might follow up with bishop to b4. I was a little bit worried about this move, knight to b4, though, which is another alternative. Cancel that. Knight to b4 is playable there, although it seems that after bishop g5, white is just fine. But anyway, I was sitting here at this position and thinking, I wanted to play that bishop d3 move. And I was a little bit annoyed by this knight to b4 idea, so I played the move a3, which is a blunder. So here you have a few seconds if you want to pause the video and figure out for yourself why that's a blunder. Okay, I'm going to give the answer away. The answer is it's a blunder because it doesn't defend the pawn in the center, which he could just take, and he did. And this is what I mean about him being a serious young man. He actually sat and thought about that for about 10 or 15 minutes before taking the pawn. I mean, it could have been some weird gambit that he had never seen before instead of just a blunder. But I wanted to pause and explain also at this point that I hadn't gotten any sleep the night before, or that's not true. I hadn't gotten much sleep the night before, so I was not in the best of shape for this game. So this is a sleep-deprived game. But I kind of shape up after this. There's always that shocking moment when you blunder and then you have time to recover. And I actually got back in this game. So let's see how it goes. I played bishop d3. And I was sort of expecting him just to take on c3. I mean, he can get rid of this knight, get rid of my developed piece with a tempo and just play on a piece up. But the thing to, I do have, both sides have the bishop pair, but if he does this exchange, it kind of opens up lines for my dark squared bishop as well as my light squared bishop, whereas his light squared bishop is behind the pawn chain. So I think he decided eventually, well, the chess engine thinks it's okay to take there, by the way, but I think he decided eventually just to retreat. Well, that's what he played. And I think that's not a bad move. He's just keeping the pieces on. A one pawn advantage is not necessarily enough to win the game. So the simple strategy of just taking all the pieces off and trying to win the endgame, is not a foolproof strategy. This is the first round, and he's one of the players. I'm in the under 2100 section, so the ratings in this section go from 1800 to 2100, and there are also a few players playing up. But I mean, he's one of the players who might be in contention for the title if he plays well. So for the prize. So anyway, he's motivated to do his best and make sure he wins. So not going to an uncertain and possibly drawn endgame, but just playing on with all the pieces and waiting for me to make more mistakes, which is a pretty good bet at this point. Anyway, I castled. He went bishop d6, and I went knight b5. So I think bishop d6 was a slight inaccuracy, although I looked at this with the chess engine, and that was one of the top moves. The reason I thought maybe it wasn't so great is because I play knight b5 here, and he can't really keep the bishop pair. If he retreats the bishop, then I'm just going to come out with my bishop to the f4 square, and I've got some nasty pressure there on c7. So he pretty much has to give up the bishop pair here. So he just left it there. He played h6. Stops me from pinning his knight, which, as we saw, was an idea, and some of those other lines. Also stops a knight from hopping into the g5 square. His bishop still hadn't moved, and I still had the idea of playing bishop f4 if it did, so I was in no hurry to capture that bishop. I just played rook e1. He castled, and then finally I couldn't think of anything else here better, so I went ahead and took the bishop at this point, and he took with the pawn. And what's interesting is that I was sort of expecting him to take with the queen. That's kind of a natural move, keeping his pawn structure intact. But the chess engine says after the simple move c3 that actually this is about even. That I have the bishop pair, which is sort of like worth half a pawn. So I'm down by half a pawn if you just count the material. And then secondly, he's got this light squared bishop, which is locked in behind the pawn chain, and it's not easy for him to ever liberate it because I've got a lot of pressure on the e5 square. So the chess engine says I have adequate compensation for my pawn at that point. So he played the better move. He played pawn takes. And this always, he will try and get in the move e5 and liberate his bishop that way, and this pawn is going to help with that strategy. And this keeps an advantage to black. The chess engine gives black about a half a pawn advantage here. Let's see. So I went h3. He went rook e8. Get some normal moves. I go bishop f4. I was able to get my bishop out to this good square. And also, that was the point of this h3 move, in case you're wondering. So if he attacks my bishop immediately, I'm just going to retreat back this way. So that's the idea of h3 first, then bishop f4. Let's see. He went queen c7. And actually, queen c7 maybe is a bit of a mistake. We'll come back to this later. I mean, I thought it was kind of weird putting it on this diagonal, but what he's doing is he's providing extra support. He's lining up all those pieces to support this e4 push, and so it's not much of a drawback that this pawn is pinned at the moment, because he's going to clear that up by pushing the pawn forward. So you see, I went queen d2. He went bishop to d7, so just completing his development. And right here, what does the chess engine say the best move is? Oh, the chess engine wants me to line up with my queen and bishop on this dark squared diagonal, or just drop the bishop back to h2. Thinks those are okay moves here. I was playing, I was thinking I should probably play a little more aggressively since I'm down a pawn, but maybe that's faulty reasoning. Anyway, this move c4 seems to be a bit of a weakening move. And the chess engine starts to give a bigger edge to black once again. Anyway, let's see. He went queen to b6, taking a look at this pawn and threatening also the e-pawn, right? His knight and his queen are looking at that. If he could get rid of this pawn, that's another way to liberate those pawns from coming forward. I mean, at the moment, I've got everything lined up against the e5, so I was preventing him from pushing e5. So he was looking around for some other way to make progress. So that's an interesting idea. And, well, I found an indirect way of defending the e-pawn. It's actually not so easy. Is that true? No, I could have just retreated my bishop. But if I just retreat my bishop to defend my d-pawn, then he can push his e-pawn forward. So I didn't like that idea, and I found another way to defend, which is also kind of a dual-purpose move, because it is lining up the queen and the bishop, and it indirectly defends this, because if he takes, and I'll take back, and he takes to the queen, then I have bishop h7 check, and that wins the queen, so he can't take that pawn. And now he makes an actual blunder. So up to this point, let's see, he should probably continue with just taking the pawn on c4, bishop takes, and maybe knight e7, bringing the knight over to the king side. He's just a pawn up. This pawn is isolated, but it's not particularly weak, and I have the bishop pair. So, I mean, the game would continue here with a slight edge to black, you know, somewhere between half a pawn and 1 pawn advantage to black, and that's best play there. He played the move knight to a5, and that's an actual blunder. So if you want to, this is a good position to pause and think for a while. You should find the best move for white here. Okay, pause the video, and if you want time to think about it, because I am about to give the answer away. So I'm going to tell you, actually, both of us missed this idea during the game. So after the game, he suggested that I could have considered c5 here. And that's actually a good move. That's the second choice. That's not the top choice. But if you came up with c5 as an idea, that's an interesting move, and it actually leads to a slight edge for white. So, for example, if he takes, I think he probably wants to take, and I take back. He can't take again because I have b4 as a fork, hitting the knight and the queen. So the queen has to retreat there. And then this knight a5, I mean, the reason why it looked like a good move, it's threatening here, but you know, all of those came with threats on the queen, and now I just rip to b1. And this knight to b3 idea is no longer a threat. It's not a fork or anything. In fact, the best move is probably for him to just retreat his knight here. And I am still a pawn down, but actually the chess engine thinks it's at least equal and sometimes favors white, depending on, you know, sort of the depth it's looking at. But, you know, I do have this potential passed pawn over on the queen side. I have ideas of blockading the center and keeping his pawns from coming forward and keeping his bishop imprisoned. And, you know, all of that, plus the fact that I have the bishop pair is enough compensation. So that is probably an equal position here. But as I said, that was not the best move. So the absolute best move here after knight a5, you can pause the video again if you want to think again about it. But the best move here is the old sacrifice on h6. Bishop takes h6. And once I saw this, I really did not think about this during the game, and my opponent didn't think about it either. But once I saw this on the board, it is kind of amazing. Everything is perfectly lined up for this. The knight is ready to hop in to g5 here. This bishop is already on this diagonal, so we've got control of both the light and the dark squared diagonals. And my queen is supporting the bishop and ready to come in there if he takes. And in the meantime, his pieces are undeveloped. The rook is undeveloped. His queen and his knight are on the wrong side of the board, and they're blocked. They're not easily getting over because there's a very solid structure in the center. This is often the problem with the French defense. You know, the blocked up center prevents black from maneuvering his pieces back to the defense in time. So let's give a couple examples here. If he takes, This loses almost immediately. First of all, I'm up some pawns, and his knight is under attack, and if the knight moves, there's a threat of queen here and knight coming into g5. This is all awful. Let's see if he doesn't take the bishop. He could try knight to h7, and after knight h7, then after knight h7, then queen to f4 is a good move. Notice this pawn is loose over here. Let's see if he takes now. Queen takes h6. He could play f5. He needs to block this bishop because the queen and the bishop were threatening to take on h7. Let's see, I can take, and he takes back, or some other move. But anyway, my knight is coming in here to g5, and I just have this killer attack. There's also what was it? There was one other move here. It was in this position. Oh yeah, after queen h6, if he takes the pawn hitting my bishop, I don't even have to take that pawn back. I can just directly sacrifice the bishop and go here for rook e4. And if he, the threat of course is the rook coming over here. If he takes that, then I can take with the bishop, and this is all losing. Once again, I'm threatening mate over here. So anyway, pretty dangerous attack there, and just win according to the chess engine. So after knight a5, that was my big chance in this game. I could have won with bishop takes h6, or gotten a playable position with c4. Instead, I played queen to b4. What I was worried about in this position, as I said, was knight coming in here to b3, forking my queen and my rook, and so I'm just moving my queen away from that fork. And I didn't spot his reply. He has a very good reply here. He doesn't have to take my queen right away. He can throw in this move. Pawn takes c4, and I can't take back. That's one thing I missed. If I take back, he can then trade queens and then take the bishop. So this just loses another pawn. So now I'm down 2 pawns. And in fact, I'm losing after queen takes b4. There's no way out, and he doesn't let me off the hook. Let's see, the best move here might be just retreating the bishop. He could play something like bishop c6. We could trade, but and let's see, I could bring my knight to d2 to avoid further pawn damage and try and go after this pawn. But he can defend this pawn and get his knight back in the game, and he has 2 pawns up. So my bishop pair is just not enough. He could go on to win that. I tried something a little trickier, but anyway, these little tricks were not working for me. I've tried bishop d2. The idea is if he takes my bishop, I will take his knight. But he didn't do that. He took the queen. And let's see, I took back with the bishop, and now he hopped his knight into b3. And this was a much better way of playing it, because now it's a double attack. My bishop is hanging, and also the exchange is hanging. So now I can take this pawn, and he grabbed the rook in the corner. So at this point, if I just take back, which is kind of the natural move there, I'm down the exchange, and I'm down 1 pawn. And it just doesn't look good. He can push his pawns forward, liberate his bishop, and it's not much I can do about it with his extra piece, or with the exchange. Bringing his extra rook into the game, he should have a pretty straightforward win in that endgame. So I tried one last trick. I was kind of noticing that this knight actually can't escape. If it comes here, I can take it. If it comes here, I can attack it with the rook, and and from this square. So if the knight is on this square and it's attacked by the rook, it has nowhere to go. Everything is guarded. This bishop, well, what I'm thinking of is I'm thinking of grabbing another pawn, so that bishop won't be there, and well, he could get a pawn back by taking over there. But basically, his knight is trapped in that sequence. So I went ahead and grabbed this pawn. But Black here has a very good reply. So for the last time in this video, why don't you see if you can figure out the best move for black in this position. Okay, I'm going to pause the video here, and I'm going to give the answer away. So pause the video if you want time to think about it. The right answer is one rook or the other, either rook, to the C file, attacking my loose bishop here. And if I move the bishop, then his knight escapes. There's nowhere I can really go to. And he, in fact, played rook e to c8. And now if I take his knight, he'll take my bishop. He's a whole rook up. And if I move my bishop, he will free his knight with knight to c2, supported by the rook on c8. And he will also be a rook up in those lines. So I just resigned at this point. That was it. So a kind of a rough start to that tournament. But well, it's a long tournament. There's 7 rounds, and I am at the bottom of the section. So you know, the first round pairing is always tough, and you know, first round loss doesn't really mean a whole lot. So I was not really discouraged after that, and got to play some interesting games in subsequent rounds. So stay tuned, and I will bring those to you. See you then. Bye.